At Rio Tinto, we're always finding better ways of doing things, from the material we extract and supply to the world, to the legacy that we leave behind after we reclaim former sites like the Holden Copper Mine. The Holden Mine Cleanup Project is located in central Washington, in a remote spot high in Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest. The goal of the project is to clean up the hazardous material left behind by decades of mining at the Holden Copper Mine. No tax dollars were used for this project. It's fully funded by Rio Tinto, and to date we have committed more than $500 million and more than 2 million worker hours to the project.
Holden opened as a mine in 1938 and operated until 1957. It was an underground copper mine, and then after it closed in the 50s, it very much sat here unused for a long time. By the standards of the time, it was a very large copper mine. They produced over 2 million tons of copper over those almost 2 decades. Also produced significant amount of gold, silver, and zinc from the ore. After the mine closed, the former operator, Howe Sound, sold the mine to the Lutheran Bible Institute. They subsequently developed Holden Village, which is a spiritual retreat that operates on the town site of the former mine under a special use permit administered by the U.S. Forest Service. Today we work together with them to try to achieve things here in the valley that are beneficial for both them and us, so we very much coexist. They have walking trails across our tailings piles. We had to remove some of their infrastructure to complete the remediation. We've rebuilt that very much. We see ourselves as neighbors and partners with Holden Village.
Rio Tinto is our neighbor just a mile down the road. We're the only people who live here in the Railroad Creek Valley. So because it's reachable only after a trip on a boat up lake and not accessible by road, it means we're remote in the truest sense of the word. Holden Village has been a little daunting to access. And now that we have a much more aesthetically pleasing and a healthier setting with the remediated areas, one of the commitments that we have is to make the wilderness accessible to all people. And no longer would orange tailings dust be blowing across the road and into our community on a breezy day. To know that that water is clear and clean, that there are fishes that haven't been living there before now, who are thriving, who have come back before anticipated. It really is inspiring, and we see how closely we live together with nature.
The remediation behind me, this tailings pile here was an almost vertical slope, and it was discolored, and it was leaching the heavy metals straight into Railroad Creek. So the aluminum, the copper, the cadmium, the iron, and the zinc were just delivered straight into the stream off that bank. It looks dramatically different, and a lot of it's due to the stabilizing of the tailings pile slopes and adding the capping material of the large rock material on the slopes. They've also put a soil cap on there and mulch. Then it was a bare, kind of denuded surface with blowing dust. Now it's coming back as a forest. The thing for me is that there's that sense of permanence, knowing that we're here to clean this water as long as it needs to be treated. There's ongoing stewardship. I think that's how it's changed, is that Rio Tinto is here and the Forest Service is here, and our partners in Holden Village to persist and keep the stewardship going.
The major accomplishments of Phase 1 is redirecting about 900 feet of Railroad Creek, regrading about 8 million tons of tailings, and then having all the infrastructure in place to collect all the wastewater and run it through the water treatment plant. Phase 1, we built a barrier wall that went for most of the length of the tailings. So the sources of water for the water treatment plant at Holden come from 2 places. We've got 2 walls, one at a tailings pile where there's a pipeline that runs to the water treatment plant, and then another in the old mine workings where there's another wall and a pipeline that goes to the water treatment plant. So those 2 sources are collected and treated there and then discharged back to the creek. A byproduct of the water treatment plant process is sludge. That sludge is delivered to tailings pile 1, where it is stored. The long-term goal of the facility is to contain it, cover it, and then add more growth media and keep revegetating the surface of that like the rest of the tailings.
We've completed Phase 1, which is the largest part of the remediation.
That was the most intensive construction, the biggest bang for the water quality buck. The next phase is making sure that there is no contamination coming out. So the majority of the contamination is now collected with the existing barrier wall and how the water is treated. And in doing that and in monitoring, we know there's still more work to be done. And so that's phase two. Phase two is completing the work of phase one, and we want to make sure that all the contaminated water is being collected and is being treated before it comes back into Railroad Creek. So that's what's next. Finishing up phase two won't be as big, but it's definitely needed and will result in clean water for generations to come. As part of the Holden Mine remediation, there were wetlands that were disturbed to build the remediation. So there are places up there that are forested wetlands, so they're wet soils, wet vegetation, but they needed to be disturbed to do the construction parts of the remediation. So things like moving a stream or laying back tailings piles sometimes disturbed a wetland area. We keep track of those wetland areas, and mitigation is required. One of the ways to do that is through conservation. And so there was an area in the Lake Chelan Valley that came up for wetland mitigation. And that area is within the Lake Chelan Basin, and it's just right here on Bear Mountain, just outside of town of Chelan. And Rio Tinto purchased that 2,100 acres, and then they donated it to the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. And so those wetlands will be preserved as a way to mitigate the wetlands that were disturbed at Holden Mine remediation.
Our desire for this project was to bring long-lasting benefit to the region, not only by cleaning up the area and preventing further contamination, but also by supporting the economy and giving back to the community. Over the project's life, Rio Tinto contributed nearly $240 million to the local economies of Chelan and Douglas counties and supported several community efforts, including making donations to the Lake Chelan Hospital Foundation's youth health programs and to the Chelan Area Emergency Management and Hospital Services to help in their fight against COVID-19. We also work with the Chelan Chamber of Commerce to construct a new visitor center where people can learn more about the project. More recently, our team coordinated with the U.S. Forest Service to donate 2,100 acres of land for permanent conservation to the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. The success of the cleanup and these community endeavors would not have been possible without the support, expertise, and commitment of all the agents and community partners. These partners include the Confederated Tribe and Bands of the Yakama Nation, the Washington Department of Ecology, the EPA, and our day-to-day partners at Holden Village and the U.S. Forest Service.
In addition to our partnerships with Rio Tinto and the U.S. Forest Service, a key relationship in this remediation project is the Yakama Nation. They remind us constantly, in a very good way, that this land has been here for millennia and it will be here long after our presence and our impact. How can we build on those shared commitments that Holden Village has, that the Yakama Nation has, that the Forest Service has for their lands under their responsibility, and that Rio Tinto has for making sure that this remediation can be an example for other places where that kind of shared partnership is a positive community contribution and where the land ends up being more accessible and can come back from the kind of mining operation that happened here more than 100 years ago.
For the first time in nearly 60 years, the water flow in Railroad Creek through the Holden Village is clean and life-sustaining for fish and other aquatic species. The 90 acres of tailings and waste rock piles left behind by the Holden Mine were reclaimed and can now better withstand earthquakes. They also have been replanted with native trees and shrubs. The facilities that Rio Tinto used during construction, including the parking area at the Lake Chelan Boat Company, boat ramp at Lucerne, and a trail system near the site, have been repaired and improved for public use. The cleanup project is a significant win for everyone: the aquatic species, wildlife, and humans that depend on water from this area and downstream at Lake Chelan. We are proud to say that this once contaminated landscape is now a legacy of clean water for generations to enjoy.